Second month of 2021. It's the second PGN Par 4. I'm Matt Gajtka alongside Zach Weiss. Zach, we mentioned in our first episode of the new year, there are players with something to prove this season. And my guy with something to prove, I should say, was Brooks Koepka. And look at him. He surges to the lead with a chip-in eagle on number 17 Sunday at the Weiss Management Open at TPC Scottsdale, Greater Phoenix, and wins where he won for the first time ever back in 2015. So full circle for Brooks, who's been fighting through injuries, in particular that left knee, left hip. It's all been bothering him. He looked every bit vintage form. And my question for you, Zach, is after the win, which now is his fifth regular tour event to go with 4 majors, so he finally has more regular tour wins than he does major championships. But my question to you is, for a guy who never really needs that much runway, it seems, to get into major championship form, does this win already convince you that he's right up there with guys like DJ and Rory as far as favorites are concerned for some of the biggest tournaments of this year?
It's hard to say, and it's nice to give a quick nod to DJ for what he was able to do overseas this past weekend. We'll get to see him at Pebble Beach later this week, which we'll see how he handles the jet lag and that quick turnaround. Him and several other guys went with the money and went over to Saudi Arabia and went with where the money's at. And it's unfortunate, just harkening on that point for a quick second, just that because of the allure of the money, you see guys like him. Phil Mickelson went over there as well, and you have events such as this week with Pebble. You have events such as this past week in Phoenix. And it's unfortunate that events like that are taking a little bit of hits. But unfortunately, you have to be creative to get golfers to come overseas. And if it's more in the pocketbook, then you're going to see guys like the 2 that I just mentioned that are going to take that plunge. And they have every right to do so. It just stinks for the regular stops like Phoenix, like Pebble, that are 2 of the oldest tour stops that are having that kind of blowback. So in that sense, it's unfortunate when you have iconic holes. 16th at Phoenix at TPC Scottsdale's one of the most iconic holes on the whole year. And Pebble Beach, there's so many iconic holes that you can look at that are some of the earliest memories for a lot of us golf fans. So it's tough in that respect. But on to Brooks. It's very ironic that we were talking a few months ago about that Memorial tournament, and Brooks Koepka mentioned in his press conference that tournament was the low point. And when you really look back at that tournament and look at the microscope, those first 2 rounds, all eyes were on him because he was paired with McIlroy. He was paired with Tiger Woods. So with the people that were on the course, and even with the PGA Tour Live and, of course, the Golf Channel and NBC and CBS rights, rather, you're going to see those eyes on him. And with him, he was clearly in a lot of pain, and he masked it. And you said, how injured can you be? And he kind of pulled back the curtain, which is very un-Brooks-like, where shots that are in the bunker, he was in pain every single time he was in a bunker. Picking up a ball, marking a ball was very difficult for him. Him trying to play the ball back in a stance in the rough, that was a difficult thing for him to do. And you saw somehow he was able to make that cut. I believe it was a kind of a back-to-back with how everything worked at Memorial. But if I remember correctly, I think he made that cut on the number. But him trying to grind to make the cut just showed how much pain he is. And for him to specifically answer, hey, what's the low point? Usually he's a little bit more secretive, but you look at Brooks and he really didn't hide anything. He was very straightforward. It's probably the most reflective you've ever seen Brooks Koepka. Normally when it's a golf topic, unless it's a controversial issue, he's very flatline. He doesn't really give you too much, and really that's his right. He's not going to give you much, but he reveals that. He reveals about how having some fans back really seemed to light a fuse under him. And you see guys like Tiger Woods that are very like that. You could see Bryson DeChambeau in a sense kind of is like that. And then you have guys that maybe Phil Mickelson's in that category as well. And then you have guys that it doesn't seem to affect one way or the other. But it's clear that Brooks, maybe he likes that audience. He likes having that chip in the shoulder, maybe being right in front of him. And you know what? Good on him. And I think when you have something like what happened a couple weeks ago, which was at this point from both sides, amicable parting with Claude Harmon III, Brooks kind of has one less voice in his ear, and it's maybe a good thing where it's more on him to produce. And it's a really good time for him to produce, as we're going to get into some swings and into some bigger tournaments by nature. And it's a good timing for him. Seems like he's got things together. Does it make him a major favorite? we've seen one week. It's a little bit too early to tell. I know we're going to talk about a couple others that might fall in that same line later on this par four, but it's a very, very encouraging sign. But here we are, you have one guy. Is he back? We don't know. And then the conversation completely shifts from that guy that we'll talk about later to this guy, Brooks Koepka. And again, it's too early to tell. By and large, he didn't make too many mistakes, but the round was kind of ho-hum until 17 when he kind of pulled ahead. It was almost, wow, Brooks is ahead. You had a couple other names that were big that you were looking at as, can they pull it? I mean, let's not forget, when we're turning, we're talking about James Hahn, the guy that went Gangnam Style on the 16th hole a few years ago at this very same course. And he had a 3-shot lead, and it looked to be his tournament. Then it looked to be someone else's tournament. But at the end, it ended up being Brooks Koepka's tournament, not quite Xander Schauffele's, which is another guy that was on the come up and had a really good chance as well. So congratulations to Brooks. It's 1 week. It's a non-major. It'll be interesting to see how – it is nice to see him getting up for a non-major again. And maybe this might be his biggest win because of what he had to overcome. Yes, majors are majors, but for Brooks, this pretty much darn well was near a major. He proved a lot to himself, and perhaps that's the most important takeaway from all of this.
Yeah, I didn't think he was done necessarily, but he looked very much like a diminished player last year. And we knew he was hurt. It's dating back a couple of years now. But at the same time, it was easy to wonder, well, maybe this is just the new normal for him. Maybe he's just not going to be a consistent contender. But if he's healthy, Zach, I feel good about him contending in any major. He's got the game to do it anywhere. He's got the power, obviously, but he also has the touch. And I think it was very fitting that it was a short game shot that propelled him over the top at Phoenix, because that's been an underrated part of his game just because of his look and his persona. He's the big brawny golfer, right? But at the same time, he's been known to sink putts from all over the green, and he has shown a very good touch from 50 yards and in as well. And when he's clicking well and everything is going well for him, then that's certainly one of the main strengths of his game, even though he does have a different type of a reputation. And you brought it up, what drama it was in Phoenix. At one point, there were 10 golfers either tied for the lead or within one stroke of the lead. We could have had a 10-player playoff feasibly there if things broke a certain way. And that backstretch at TPC Scottsdale is as entertaining as any on the PGA Tour. I love that 17th hole, especially the risk-reward par 4. And it got the better of our next subject here as we shift over to the second shot. You left out his name from your comments just a moment ago, but we can say it now. Jordan Spieth looking like, at least for a moment there, well, for a couple of moments, in fact, over the course of last weekend, like the guy that he was when he won a handful of majors. So we have Kepca coming back and winning. We have Jordan Spieth, owner of 3 major championships to Kepka's 4, also showing some flashes. And he went to Texas, not Notre Dame, Zach, but he woke up the echoes with that 61 on Saturday, his career low round on the PGA Tour. The putts were going in from everywhere, which is what we're used to seeing from Spieth whenever everything is clicking. But short game was there, approach game. He was stuffing them in, at least through the first 3 days. He made the most of an erratic driving week. He was actually third from the bottom in terms of strokes gained off the tee. So that part of it still scares me, and that's why I wasn't bullish on him winning. I picked Schauffele going into that final round. Turned out neither one of those two played very well on Sunday. But Spieth, of course, all of our eyes were on him. And he certainly gets people interested who aren't normally otherwise that interested in just your regular run-of-the-mill tour event. So Spieth fades on Sunday, but at least he looked frisky. It's been a long time, and he's still right around 70th in the world. So he's got a long way to go. We talk about Kepka falling off. Spieth has fallen off much, much more than that. And he's still below 100th on the FedEx Cup as early as it is in those standings. But what did you see from him? Do you feel like he showed enough to make you at least optimistic that we could be seeing that much anticipated Jordan resurgence? Because he's still just 27 years old, still plenty of time in his golf career. But much like Kepka, it's been a dark couple of years for Mr. Spieth.
Honestly, it's been more than a couple of dark years. At least with Kepka, it's kind of a shorter memory. With Spieth, it's more of a mental gap. And I think that's really the biggest difference. And with Kepka, I think he's got more flashes in his golf game where he has things that can rescue him. But with Spieth's driving block, there's less margin for error for him to do well. And I think the biggest thing is when you have historically, at least in recent history, when you have a player that really goes low in that third round, it's really, really difficult to pick those pieces back up and have that good fourth round. You see it so many times. A guy shoots 61, 62, and then you just stop. You have all that hour, you're in your own head, you think about it, you sleep on it, and it's just so difficult, so demanding both physically and mentally to follow that up and do it all over again. Now, granted, on the PGA Tour Champions, where the course layouts are a little bit easier and you have guys that are shooting 63, 64, if you don't do that one round, then you lose. But this is completely different because of the nature of the layout. In Spieth's case, it's so difficult. I mean, he has to take positive that he was 92nd ranked in the world, 92nd ranked in the world before this tournament. And as you alluded to, he finished 69. So he's now ranked 69th. He goes from 92nd to 69th. So he's in the right direction. Still not in the match play, but he's in the right direction. But man, oh man, was golf Twitter so much fun to watch on Saturday, just seeing everybody pop out of the woodwork. And you mentioned a lot of people said that was the next Tiger Woods. That was the expectation on him. And in a sense, he's at this point maybe buckled under that, although he hasn't mentally given too much away in that respect. But it's so refreshing to see people that are just doing a play-by-play of Jordan Spieth's round. You didn't need to watch the television broadcast to see where Jordan Spieth was, because everybody that was anybody in golf was, or fan-wise, was all over the place noting. And I think maybe it did help him as well that there were some fans that were kind of encouraging him and rooting him on. And I mean, it'd be hard-pressed not to find that. But the biggest issue is that driving. And it wasn't even on 17. It happened before 17 as well. He kerplunked before on the back nine earlier too. So, and it says a lot about his resolve that he got to 17 after the one water ball, and he still had a shot to contend in that tournament. A tournament where we thought for sure that the Super Bowl was going to get preempted by a 10-man playoff, which is, if you had that, then go take your cash 5 prize or whatever the case may be. But for Spieth, I would say I'm 75% encouraged, 25% neutral, because he got that Saturday round, although Sunday was kind of more back to business as usual. I think the biggest thing was that he didn't want to play in this tournament. He didn't initially want to commit to playing in Phoenix, but instead of having that attitude and carrying it onto the golf course, he played professional golf, and it was the best showing he's had in quite some time. And if he can maintain that attitude and maintain that owner's mentality of a mindset, then I do think you are going to see him in the winner's circle. Now, where that is, it's hard to say. I don't think it's at a major, at least not yet. We haven't seen enough for that to happen yet. But could he run away and steal a tournament with a couple low rounds and maybe a Texas tournament, or maybe a little bit of a lower tier tournament that maybe the field isn't as strong? Absolutely. Or maybe he could string a couple of top 10s together, and then all of a sudden he's back in the conversation. I mean, he had, the third best odds of anybody in the field this week at Pebble, if I remember correctly. So that says a lot about where the betting money is at, or that just says a lot about a lot of people are about to be suckers. But regardless of that matter of fact, it's just good to see Jordan Spieth happy on a golf course again, regardless of what that means money-wise, regardless of how that quantifies from a results perspective. Jordan Spieth is competing, Jordan Spieth is happy, and Jordan Spieth has given himself a serious conversation where he could be on that first page of a leaderboard again. So he showed a lot this weekend. Is he there yet? I think we know the answer to that. Not quite yet, but it's not as much yeah buts anymore, and I think that's the biggest thing.
You brought up Claude Harmon and his breakup with Brooks Koepka in the previous segment. There was a moment or two where Butch Harmon was looking at Jordan Spieth's swing, and the long game just still isn't quite there for me, Zach, off the tee, I should say, because for the most part, he showed a lot from 200 yards and in Phoenix. I think if it's a second shot type of a golf course, like say, I don't know, a place down in Georgia called Augusta National, I like his chances a lot better than a place where you have to position yourself well off the tee. For instance, Torrey Pines 2 weeks ago with a long rough and kind of a brawnier setup. That's going to be tough for Jordan Spieth, who's not one of the longer guys anyway, and he's driving it so crooked, and it's going both ways. He doesn't even know which side he's missing on a given day. So that's what makes it difficult, and that's what makes you wonder what exactly is going on. But we know that if he can get it around the green, magic is certainly in play. So golf's better when Jordan Spieth is interesting, and when he is showing himself to be at least a contender once in a while. So I'm glad we saw that again, if only for 1 week right now. And we look ahead to see how we can build on that as the West Coast swing matures onto the Texas swing, and we move into the meat of the schedule here. Well, speaking of Torrey Pines, 2 weeks ago, Zach, it was a 4-stroke win for Patrick Reed in La Jolla, Greater San Diego. And, well, talk about attention for the right reasons. Jordan Spieth, Brooks Koepka this past week. Yeah, I see you're shaking your head there. Patrick Reed getting involved in yet another rules incident. A couple of years ago was the shoveling of the sand. And Peter Kostis, former CBS on-course commentator, has noted on the No Laying Up podcast last year that he saw Patrick Reed improve his lie at least 3 times up close over the course of his coverage career. And Patrick Reed's been out there for several years. The rumors are out there, and now we've seen it on camera. Sure looked like that was not an embedded ball, Zach, that he tried to claim was. And he didn't go against the letter of the rule in doing so in that third round. And the tournament went on to win by 4. So it didn't really, maybe it didn't matter as much in the final margin, but in terms of the spirit of the game of golf, it just seems like this guy doesn't care for me. And it's bothersome. I think we finally reached a tipping point here with his fellow pros because several, including Xander Schauffele, were openly critical, openly dubious of Reed's intentions with the media in their media availabilities after the Saturday and Sunday rounds. So I think we might have reached a point here where all the smoke has indicated quite a bit of fire when it comes to Patrick Reed's morality and his adherence to the rules on the course and his belief in the fact that golf is an honorable game. So what say you? I haven't talked to you since that incident. It's been a couple of weeks here. It was a tough watch for sure. And I think CBS treated it with the gravity it deserved. And I feel like people have seen enough from Patrick Reed, and he's not going to be getting the benefit of the doubt if he even was at this point going into that tournament.
Patrick Reed is essentially the Facebook relationship status. It's complicated because every single thing about him has become complicated. His relationship with his parents, it's complicated. His apparel deal, I guess, with Nike is gone. I don't know the particulars about that, and
he just bought a Titleist hat, he said, from Dick's, I think, or something like that.
It just reminds me of Jason Duffner buying hats at the golf course a few years ago, and he would just wear a Corona hat, or he would just wear a Columbus Save the Crew hat a couple years back at Memorial. So, at this point, everything with Patrick Reed's a choose your own adventure. He took the volunteer at the word. At least there was somebody there to watch it. At least this wasn't like a Joel Damon Sung Kang from a couple years ago just outside of D.C., where I don't think those two are ever going to be on speaking terms again, except for thank you and great round. But the one thing I will say that I will give Patrick Reed the benefit of the doubt on is if you're going to come down hard for Patrick Reed for what he did, then you have to come down equally hard at Rory Mcilroy for a very similar circumstance. So, yes, McIlroy's a little bit more clean cut. He's a little bit more straightforward, has a lot better of a relationship with pretty much every single mainstream golf media member. So naturally, there's going to be a little bit more benefit of the doubt, whereas Patrick Reed is kind of like a Bubba Watson kind of a character, although at least Bubba Watson has a little bit of an aw shucks and has his moments where it's maybe a little bit black and white, a little bit herky-jerky. Patrick Reed, everything about Patrick Reed is black and white. I feel like he's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. Everything about this guy just screams red flag. Heck, his caddy went after a fan at the Ryder Cup, Kessler Corain a couple years ago, if I remember correctly. There was that battle. There's his wife Justine on the bag, and there's those two trying to defend things. There's, again, the family relationship. There's Patrick Reed. Time and time again, there's some kind of rules infringement or there's some kind of something. I think the player speaking to the media was a very important step, but it was kind of like dipping the toe into the pool. If you really were that concerned, you could have talked to a rules official privately. You could have called something in and expressed your concern, which several tour pros have done before. and they could do so with the anonymity and the respect that it deserved in that sense as well. So, yes, there are some pros that were politically polite and slightly critical of the situation, but if you're really that frustrated and that upset about it, it's clear talking to Patrick Reed himself isn't going to work. Talking to the media can only do so much and increasing the narrative. It's almost like if a teacher asks you, did you see someone cheat on your test? You're not going to say, no, he didn't cheat on the test or anything like that. Just be straightforward about it. You don't have to make golf a complete gentleman's game every single time. If you saw something, say something. It just seems so simple. And the longer that you go, well, I thought I saw something wrong, and then not report it, then we're going to be talking about this ad nauseum. Now, granted, this is what makes Patrick Reed successful. He likes ruffling the feathers. We see so much that he's almost a must-have on a team competition because you guaranteed or guaranteed a point in a singles competition. But in the same sense, you also have to have him gel with guys. And Xander Schauffele is a guy that's been a perennial in his young career, Ryder Cup, President's Cup caliber kind of a guy. And you have guys that just don't want to play with him, and essentially he's restricted to playing with Tiger Woods. And I think the relationship between him and Jordan Spieth, with that whole dream team, Golden Boys kind of a feel on the team circuit, that kind of ship kind of sailed. And is he worth the baggage? It's really, really hard to say. I mean, for me, if I have to watch Patrick Reed, then I tend to want to go to the other channel because it's just a very uneasy feeling when he's there. Now, granted, he's a very talented player, and when he needs to be clutch, there aren't many golfers that are more clutch in crunch time than Patrick Reed. Just ask the man. He's the guy that made the top 5 comment. But regardless of that, I mean, Patrick Reed, it's very uneasy watching him. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But until they say something, there's not going to be much that can be done. And just saying it to the media might get some more fans behind it, but the tour is not going to pay attention to that. You have to take the next step.
I know one thing. He's going to test people's allegiances coming up at the Ryder Cup in September here, the postponed Ryder Cup. That's the event at which Reed became a star, really. And then, of course, he went on to win the Masters, too. But Reed, Captain America, as we've called him, the 2016 Ryder Cup in Hazeltine. That's the last time it was on U.S. soil. Reed's almost assured of making that American team again. So here we go. It's going to be a conflicted time for many American golf fans, myself included, when it comes to that. And, well, just throughout the whole course of this season, I suppose it'll be interesting to see if any more players speak out or if anything else comes of it. If we find out that Reed had a discussion with Jay Monahan or someone with the PGA Tour as far as toning it down and straightening up and flying right, who knows? He's the type of guy who might defy such an edict from above, though. You mentioned Rory Mcilroy. So, yeah, let's tie it together there, Zach. Rory was one of a couple of pros who were outspoken against the USGA and R&A's joint project, the Distance Insights report, which was released last year. Rory calling it self-absorbed and a waste of time and money for these two of the sport's governing bodies to put together a scientifically sound report on the fact that the game has changed due to the increasing technology, the improving technology when it comes to golf clubs and golf balls and just equipment in general. And I know what the USGA and R&A are trying to do here, Zach. It's to make sure that the game maintains that level of skill needed to succeed in it. And I think we all know, us amateurs, the game is pretty darn hard, and we appreciate the game improvement aspects that are out there. And I suppose that's a different discussion for perhaps a different day here. But as far as it comes to the PGA Tour, and this is where the USGA and the R&A are really leaning on the PGA Tour and the European Tour to a lesser extent, they are proposing something called bifurcation, which is the idea that pros and high-level competitive amateurs can have different equipment regulations, ones that would tamp down the distance of shots as compared to us rank amateurs. So My question for you here, and I'm not sure I have an answer for it myself because it's pretty fascinating. You don't really see it in other sports necessarily. I suppose baseball is one of them with aluminum bats allowed in college and not in the pros. But for the most part, sports have equipment regulations across the board, whether you're a pro, an amateur, or just a kid picking up the game for the first time. But the idea of two separate sets of rules, it could be feasible. It could actually, in one way, make money for manufacturers because they would have to then produce a couple of different sets of equipment. Maybe that would give people more options. I'm not sure. Or it could also complicate things for manufacturers who've put a lot of R&D and time and effort into improving golf clubs and golf balls. So there's a lot of things to discuss here in this regard. But how do you feel about the idea of the pros playing by a different set of rules, thus allowing, in theory, at least the better players, the more skilled players, to succeed because they wouldn't be the whole field wouldn't be carried by technology that lifts all boats, so to speak?
It's there's no answer. I mean, I think they've been trying to find an answer, and they've been so delayed by COVID with their findings. And I think that their timetable had to accelerate given the news that Bryson DeChambeau's made within the last calendar plus year. I mean, the guy's experimenting with a 48-inch driver. He's essentially driving it at Happy Gilmore distances. I mean, he's getting 400 yards on some of these drives. He's driving greens, and at this point it's almost like Lance Armstrong in the Tour de France. You kind of got to pay to play, and if you want to follow his diet, or if you want to follow some things, or if you want to follow some swings from world long drive guys, then that might be what you have to do to stay competitive. I mean, the guy's won multiple times out there since these changes, including a major. And I mean, if that isn't a poster child for it, so of course they had to expedite the timetable. But there's been so much talk. Is it reducing the length of a driver? Is it making just a universal golf ball where everybody has to use the same golf ball, or if they're tied to their equipment company, they're all made in-house, same factory, just with a different stamping on it? I mean, at that point, you're just mixing stuff. I mean, it's just so complicated. And even from a fan aspect, I don't even know if I'm sure the fans love to see the long grip it, rip it. I mean, everybody's been long enamored with what John Daly's been able to do, with what Tiger Woods has been able to do, even to a degree. Phil Mickelson was one of the longer guys in his prime off the tee as well. And it's fun to see, but then here you are on the course, and it's just not possible in some respects. So if you're going to tamper it down, and the fans, maybe it's not going to be something they want to see, or if even from an amateur perspective, this is different set of rules for this just because of the pedigree they are and how much the distance race is going. I mean, it's just so complicated when you really look at the stretch of things, and with review periods and length of driver. I mean, it's just so complicated because they're just trying to find little cheats to get things. So, I mean, you can look at both sides of the coin and try to maybe find some medium ground. Maybe this is their first steps to trying to find the medium ground and restrict things, or maybe force the Bryson DeChambeaus to conform, just like we were talking about trying to force Patrick Reed to possibly conform. This might be a way for them to go, okay, you got to set it back. There are some limits, but I don't think there's really an answer until they try to implement this, and then they'll have to see, hey, does this work? Does this not? Is this fair to the average tour hitter that's maybe just scraping, which average now is 300 something yards off the tee? I mean, here you have a guy in the top 10 like a Colin Morikawa that's hitting below average, and he's still finding ways to compete, which all the credit in the world to him. But I mean, it leads you to wonder, why are a lot of these other guys not able to compete? And this is, I guess, their chance and their way of trying to answer that question. But it seems crazy, but I mean, the distance and the advanced technology is also crazy, and it's trying to find that marriage. And this is their attempt to follow that marriage. And really, it's so confusing with trying to simplify essentially the rules of golf in this finding into a 2-3 page document. And there's no right answer, and I guess we're about to find out if there's a wrong one.
I don't think that distance is a huge issue with amateurs right now. Most of us are just trying to get the ball on the center of the club face and hope that it goes somewhere close to the direction that that we were aiming. But I do foresee a situation where maybe 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 years down the line, that a lot of the courses that we love to play are just becoming, if not obsolete, then definitely constricted because of you know that drivers are going to get better, the golf ball is going to continue to get better and better, the ball is going to continue to fly further and further, and it's going to start it's going to spin more and more, it's going to launch higher and higher. It's just you can't fight technology in that way. So I get what the USGA and the R&A, the Royal and Ancient from overseas, is trying to do here. But as for right now, I do think the PGA Tour could benefit from introducing more skill as far as a deciding factor, as opposed to brute strength, or in this TrackMan era, optimizing everything based upon your swing. It's a lot of fun for us amateurs and, of course, the pros to dial it in, to get the right shaft flex, to get the right kick point, to find the right head size and iron type and putter design, that sort of thing. It's all part of technology making the game more fun for a lot of us, pros included. But at the same time, at what point does the best equipment win over the best player? I don't know if we're quite there yet, but it is something to consider. And it is also worthy to think about the fact that a lot of folks like it when pros hit some bad shots. Like, for instance, down the stretch here in Phoenix this past week, balls in the water, a lot of places, some dodgy putts as well, some situations where guys weren't absolutely at their best, but it made for tremendous theater, I would say. And when you have that differentiation, when you have guys hitting great shots like Brooks Koepka did down the stretch, and guys hitting not so great shots, I think that makes things more interesting. And that's also a thing that the PGA Tour and the European Tour, pro golf in general, has to consider. The entertainment factor. If everyone's bombing it, if players for the most part are able to put a ton of spin-off shots from the rough and stop it on the greens, even though they didn't really hit the best drive, I'm not sure that's exactly what we're looking for here. So it depends on the eye of the beholder in a lot of ways. But I wouldn't mind seeing at some point a bit of a distance rollback on the Pro Tour, just to not necessarily equalize the playing field. The longer hitters are always going to be the longer hitters, but I would like to see skill be rewarded, maybe a little bit more than it is right now. So bifurcation is okay for me if they want to go that route for the entire game, amateurs included. I'm still less sold on that. So the USGA and the R&A is going to have to do some more selling when it comes to people like me and convincing me that it really is an issue at all levels of the sport, distance that is. Zach, good stuff. Thanks again for joining me here on the PGN Par 4. Hey, one more month, we'll be into spring officially, and then it will really be golf season for us, not just the PGA Tour pros.
Well, sure, and it's good to see that this curve is starting to get back on the right side of things, that it seems like cold and flu is down from year before. It's really good news because it means that people have been smart. With that being said, hopefully you all and your families are being safe and there haven't been many health complications. I know I've had a couple friends that have been under so it's been and hospitalized in those tubes, so it's been a very difficult time for all of us, and just we hope that you're exerting caution, and we hope that the weather, which has not been that great this week, will normalize soon so that we can all get back out there and play, which really is the good name of the game. And so far we also can hope that the PGA Tour, with the limited fans, that those cases end up not being positive and that more fans will be out soon, because if more fans are out soon, then that means a lot of us can get back out there and follow some of our favorite pros in person too. And wouldn't that be a nice thing as well?
Would be a nice gift for all of us golf fans to get back to some of these tournaments. Golf in general survived, even thrived through COVID last year. But I'm ready to see more scenes like we saw in Phoenix with a couple thousand fans on hand. And, well, as you said, the trajectory should be in a positive direction here with vaccines and weather improving and folks just getting outside in general more. It's all boding well as far as getting through this. So cross your fingers, say a couple prayers, and we'll see you next time on the PGN Par 4. Bye-bye.